Once, India was a global economic titan. Its silks, spices, and steel coveted across continents. Nearly a quarter of the world's wealth flowed from its ports and workshops. Cities like Surat and Calicut bustled with trade, while artisans created wonders admired from London to Beijing. But in 1600, a foreign trading company arrived, not with armies, but with ambition. Over the next 2 centuries, that company would transform into a colonial power, extracting wealth, dismantling industries, and reshaping India's economy to serve distant masters. This is not just a tale of empire, it's a story of lost prosperity, forced change, and the resilience of a nation. Welcome to the story of the economic transformation of India under British rule. Imagine a land shimmering with untold riches, a cornerstone of global trade, its artisans crafting wonders coveted across continents. This was India, contributing nearly a quarter of the world's economic output. Yet over 2 centuries, this vibrant powerhouse was systematically reshaped, its wealth diverted, its industry stifled, leaving a legacy of profound economic disparity. How did the arrival of a trading company lead to such a monumental shift? This is the story of the economic transformation of India under British rule. Before European flags dotted its coastline, India was a beacon of prosperity. Its textiles, delicate muslins from Dhaka, vibrant calicos, rich silks, clothed the world. Its spices seasoned the tables of kings. Diamonds from Golconda, strong Indian steel, intricate metalwork. These were the fruits of a sophisticated economy. Great port cities like Surat and Calicut teemed with merchants, ships laden with treasures sailing to and from distant lands. The Mughal Empire, at its zenith, presided over an era of immense cultural and economic flourishing. Into this world, in the year 1600, sailed the English East India Company, a chartered venture with eyes on this lucrative trade. For more than a century, they, alongside the Portuguese, Dutch, and French, were petitioners at the courts of Indian rulers, seeking permission to trade, to establish small coastal factories. They were but one group among many, their ambitions initially confined to commerce. The mid-18th century was the fulcrum upon which India's destiny turned. The once mighty Mughal Empire began to fracture, its authority waning. Regional powers rose, and with them, internal conflicts. The East India Company, no longer content as mere traders, saw an opportunity. Led by ambitious and often ruthless men like Robert Clive, the company began to play a more assertive role, meddling in local politics, forging alliances, and crucially, building its own military force. The Battle of Plassey in 1757 is a name that echoes through the annals of this transformation. It was less a battle and more a conspiracy, a victory secured through bribery and betrayal, deposing Siraj-ud-Dowlah, the Nawab of Bengal. This wasn't just a military conquest, it was the key to unlocking India's treasury. 8 years later, in 1765, the Mughal emperor, weakened and under duress, granted the East India Company the Diwani of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa, the legal right to collect revenues from one of India's wealthiest regions. A merchant company had become a de facto sovereign, its focus dramatically shifting from profit through trade to profit through taxation and territorial control. The systematic extraction had begun. With territorial power came the ability to reshape India's economy to suit British interests. One of the most devastating impacts was on India's world-renowned textile industry. For centuries, Indian weavers had produced fabrics of unparalleled quality. Now, British policies, including prohibitive tariffs on Indian textiles entering Britain and the flooding of Indian markets with cheaper, machine-made cloth from the burgeoning mills of Manchester and Lancashire, began to cripple this indigenous industry. Millions of skilled weavers and spinners, who had for generations relied on this craft, found their livelihoods evaporating. India, the great textile workshop of the world, was slowly being reduced to a supplier of raw cotton for British factories and a captive market for their finished goods. Land, the bedrock of the Indian economy, was also subjected to radical new revenue systems. The permanent settlement, introduced by Lord Cornwallis in Bengal in 1793, fixed land revenue at exceptionally high levels to be collected by newly empowered landlords, or zamindars. While intended to create a stable revenue stream for the company, it often led to immense pressure on cultivators. Failure to pay the high taxes resulted in peasants falling into cycles of debt, often losing their lands to moneylenders or the zamindars themselves. Similar systems like the Ryotwari and Mahawari in other parts of India, though different in their specifics, also prioritize revenue maximization for the colonial state, frequently leading to agricultural distress and dispossession. This period also saw what Indian nationalists like Dadabhai Naoroji termed the drain of wealth. A significant portion of the revenue collected in India did not stay in India to benefit its people or develop its infrastructure for local needs. Instead, it was systematically transferred to Britain. This drain took many forms: the salaries and pensions of British civil and military officials, both in India and in Britain, profits remitted by the East India Company and later by private British investors, and the home charges, the costs of maintaining the India office in London, military expeditions undertaken by Britain outside India but charged to the Indian budget, and servicing debts incurred by the colonial government. Resources were also diverted through the forced commercialization of agriculture. Farmers were often compelled to grow cash crops like indigo, used for dye in the textile industry, and opium, a key commodity in Britain's trade with China. Even when this meant reducing the cultivation of essential food grains, the cumulative effect of these policies, combined with natural calamities, led to recurrent and devastating famines. The Great Bengal Famine of 1770, which struck early in the company's ascendancy, is estimated to have killed up to 10 million people, roughly a third of Bengal's population. Throughout the 19th century, under direct British Crown rule, famines continued to ravage the subcontinent. The Great Famine of 1876–78 and the Indian Famine of 1899–1900 were particularly horrific, claiming millions more lives. While droughts were often the trigger, historians argue that colonial policies, such as the prioritization of cash crops, the continued export of grain from famine-affected areas due to market forces and revenue demands, and the often slow and inadequate official relief measures, significantly worsened these crises, turning food scarcities into large-scale humanitarian disasters. The social fabric was torn, communities were displaced, and a cycle of poverty deepened. The Indian Uprising of 1857, a major turning point, led to the end of East India Company rule and the beginning of the British Raj, with the British Crown taking direct control of India in 1858. The Raj era saw significant infrastructure projects, most notably the vast railway network and the expansion of telegraph lines. While these developments had some modernizing effects, their primary impetus was often strategic, to facilitate the movement of raw materials to ports for export, to enable rapid deployment of troops to quell dissent, and to consolidate administrative control over the vast territory. The fundamental economic relationship, however, largely remained one of extraction and subordination. Yet the experience of colonial rule and its economic consequences also ignited a powerful nationalist movement. Indian intellectuals and leaders began to articulate a strong critique of British economic policies. The Indian National Congress, founded in 1885, evolved from a platform for elite Indian grievances into a mass movement demanding self-rule. Figures like Mahatma Gandhi, with his philosophy of nonviolent resistance and emphasis on Swadeshi, self-reliance, including the boycott of foreign goods and promotion of Indian-made products, galvanized millions. Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Patel, and a host of other leaders spearheaded the long and arduous struggle for independence. When India finally achieved independence in 1947, it was a moment of immense triumph, but it came alongside the profound tragedy of partition. The new nation inherited an economy profoundly altered by 2 centuries of colonial rule. The once dominant industries were largely dismantled or underdeveloped. Agriculture was often skewed towards colonial export needs, and poverty was widespread. The challenge of rebuilding and redirecting the economy for the benefit of its own people was immense. The economic transformation of India under British rule is a story of complex interactions, of global trade shifts, of policy decisions made thousands of miles away with far-reaching consequences on the ground. It's a narrative of lost potential, of diverted wealth, and of the immense human cost of empire. Understanding this history is not about assigning blame in a simplistic way, but about recognizing the deep and lasting impact of colonialism on the economic trajectory of a nation that was once one of the world's most prosperous. It is a past that continues to shape the present and a crucial chapter in understanding the world we live in today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Your support helps uncover the past they didn't want us to remember. Thank you for watching.